Good morning, everybody. I hope that you can hear me and hopefully you can see me as well. No doubt someone in the background will tell me if that's not working, and as they're being very quiet, I'm assuming it is. So a very good morning to all of you who have dialed in for this, I'm told, our 8th webinar in the Leading Through the Revival series, which has proved incredibly successful and actually I think very useful for everybody as well. A lot of people have come back saying how useful they're finding these, just taking some time out of their business in order to think about things that really are affecting us so much at the moment. Obviously, these sort of things don't happen without sponsorship, and you know, we are incredibly grateful to all our sponsors. Technogym, Sky, Condé Nast Johansson's, Clean, Gold Media, Crichton, Merch Hennessy and Molton Brown. And also another 2 groups that really support everything we do. And I want to take this opportunity in front of you all as well to thank both of them. One, of course, is the Worshipful Company of Innholders, who continue to support so much of what we do, especially in the educational field. And of course, that's what this is about. We are self-educating now. And as well as the Worshipful Company of Innholders, also the Savoy Educational Trust, which has been a tremendous sponsor and supporter and partner of the Master Innholders, and once again allowing us to continue our work in trying to educate some of the bright stars within our industry, and through things like this to educate ourselves. So moving on to today's talk, really what we wanted to do was focus on the wellness and the mindfulness of industry leaders, because of course we've gone through a lot ourselves in the past few months. Sometimes I think we've forgotten about ourselves. We've thought very hard about our businesses and of course about our colleagues. Many of us have had to let colleagues go, and we know the effect that that's had on them, but it's also had an effect on us as well. And I think it's very important that we're aware of who we are, what this has done to us, and how we can deal with all of that as well. So we've got with us, and thank you very much, we've got Katie Sheen, who is a mindfulness expert, and of course she has spoken to us before. So we do know who she is, and if we didn't know who she was, we certainly know who her mum and dad are, who of course Congham Hall is a great hotel, but was their hotel for many years. And both Christine and your dad worked incredibly hard. And I was lucky enough to go and visit one Christmas, and had a lovely time there. And I've noticed that Trevor is actually on this call, so he is definitely rooting for you. Now, I just have to let you know that this session is being recorded, and it will be available. And I would really ask that maybe at the end of this, you think about going into that recording when you get sent it and sharing it with other people, because I think this is all about sharing this knowledge. Now, Katie, of course, grew up with hoteliers. She's got a son who's a chef. She knows what strange people we all are. She gets that we're all nutty, we're obsessed, and this is a vocation to us all, not just a job. So I can't think of anybody who's better equipped to actually talk to us. And she talks to a lot of people, many of them not in our industry, but I do know that she's got a real affinity to the type of people you all are that have joined us today. Fortunately, she can't see you all, otherwise she would be absolutely scared stiff, I'm sure. But anyway, over to you, Katie, now, and thank you very much for coming and doing this for us. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me. It's a real honour to be here. So let me start sharing my screen so that you can see the slides, which is always a little bit clunky, but there we go. So we're going to talk about simple strategies for mindful self-care. And what we're going to be covering today is what mindfulness actually is, and exploring how mindfulness can help us to actually embody self-care, and by doing, therefore, inspire those around us. How to build stability in the present moment, redirect negative thought patterns, take in the good, tame the inner critic, incorporate self-care into everyday life, and all of this in 25 minutes. So good luck, folks. Here we go. So what is mindfulness? Well, mindfulness originates from the Buddhist tradition, but you certainly don't need to be Buddhist to enjoy it. So it's not an ideology or a belief system. You don't need to do anything with bells and whistles and anything like that. It sits beautifully alongside all faiths or none, because it is a way of being or a way of responding to the world rather than any kind of particular ideology. And as you can see there, I've got references on the slides that you're welcome to follow up. There's a mindfulness all-party parliamentary group who are helping businesses across the UK to incorporate mindfulness into the way that they work. So why practice mindfulness? This is the key thing, isn't it? Why should we bother? The primary thing is to stop running through life, and particularly in such a busy industry and when things are so stressful at the moment, I think it's quite easy to feel as though we're running and being pushed through life. So mindfulness helps us to slow down enough to avoid the stress response, so the denying or fighting, freezing, fleeing, so that we're calm, so that we're stable, and we can see things as they really are. So that gives us the insight that we need in order to inspire transformation, both within ourselves and in our surroundings. So mindfulness is about being fully present for all aspects of life and responding by taking action. So it's not about escaping, and it's not about simply focusing on the good, which is what some people, if you only dip your toe into mindfulness, it can sometimes seem like that, because when we teach mindfulness, we need to meet people where they are. And often when I work with somebody, they are in a state of increased anxiety. So the first thing that I do is kind of calm them down, help them to reset their baseline stress levels. So at that stage, it seems as though we're only focusing on the good, but the reason we're doing that is to build this inner strength so that then whoever it is, and myself included, can re-engage with life in a more constructive way. So there's a huge breadth and depth to mindfulness, and the more that you explore it, the more of these layers become apparent, and you can see that it's so much more than a relaxation technique, and it's definitely not about leaving it on the cushion, and it's much, much more than seated meditation. So coming back to the topic of today, why is mindful self-care important? Well, there's a fantastic quote, which is there is no point being an angry peace campaigner. So if what we want to inspire in our workplaces and in our personal life is this wonderful calmness, openness, kindness, and compassion, then that needs to come from within. So anything that we do around self-care is actually not selfish at all, because with mindfulness, you begin with yourself, but then you take that out into the world. That's our motivation for doing it. And I love this quote. I chose this because this reminds me of so many of you wonderful people, and when I've stayed at your incredible hotels, is that when you walk, know that you're walking. When you run, know you're running. Don't think about arriving anywhere, just enjoy yourself. And when you take even one step in peace, the whole world benefits. And this reminds me of when I turn up at one of your wonderful hotels, stressed from the journey and with everything else that's going on, somebody walks towards me calmly, kindly, embodying this wonderful atmosphere, which is why I've come to stay with you. And what mindfulness can do is to help you to really feel that from the inside, even when the circumstances are as challenging as they are at the moment. Because the minute that you embody that, that spreads out through the whole organization. And there's a new thing that's being talked about, which is team mindfulness. And this is where research now is beginning to understand the power of what I've just described, is that when we feel whole and stable, we take that out into our teams. So caring for ourselves, reducing anxiety, enables us to be more solid and stable, but importantly, more outward looking. And you might notice this with some of your team members, is when they're very anxious and afraid, or maybe angry as their response from the fear that's coming up, is that they become very self-centered, very inward looking. And when you're trying to lead a team, what you need is for people to be more solid, stable, more open, so that they respond to each other and work as one. So that's another example of where that kind of feeling starts from you and then spreads out so that you can help the team pick that up as well. So this model of leadership is where every person is an integral part of the whole. And obviously then together you can become greater than any individual. And there's a lovely book that you might be interested in, very easy read, 11 Rings by Phil Jackson, who's that incredible basketball coach. And he introduced something called One Team, One Breath, which is before the matches, they used to literally be in a circle and sync their breathing so that they actually felt, they had a felt sense of working as one. And whilst that may not be something that you think some of your teams might buy into, even if it's just a perception that you and some of your team members have of actually working in unity as one, that can be a very powerful way forward, this sense of flow between the team members. So how do you begin to build this sense of stability in the present moment so that you can take it out? So first of all, notice how often your mind wanders off to check the horizons. It's often getting caught in worries, but it wants to ensure that you're safe. So this first thing is about making friends with our anxiety. It's because it's there for a very good reason. I mean, in the middle of a pandemic is a good time for your stress response to be kicking in, because it's keeping you safe and it's trying to plan its way through to the next stages. But as you know, you can get very caught up in that thinking. So what you need is an anchor in the present moment, something that feels safe that you can come back to, so that you can reassure your mind enough that it just calms down and starts to think more clearly. So we always bring the minds back lightly, kindly, with a smile, because it's about kindness. The same way as you would to a guest that was stressed, is that you very kindly, why don't you just, settle yourself here, might get you a drink. It's that kind of thing, but bringing it to your own mind when you're aware that your mind is running off in a direction where it's feeding anxiety. Now, the out breath is particularly interesting, a lot of research around this. So just bringing attention to your breath, especially the out breath, calms us down. So it also supports our immune system. So again, in the hospitality industry, you're very exposed to lots of different people, and a good way to protect yourself is by supporting your immune system. And even just breathing deeply, particularly focusing on the out breath, supports immunity as well as helping you think more clearly. So in mindfulness, we don't really change our breathing. It's more about accepting what you find there. But just by being aware, I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out, and it just settles you where you are. So the out breath is particularly important. It's also about taking in the good. And as I mentioned before, mindfulness isn't all about this. It's not about denying the difficult things. It's about resetting our nervous system so that we can think more clearly. But whereas negative experiences go straight hardwired into our brain, which is very important, of course, if you touch something hot, you immediately want your brain to remember that so that you never do that again. So that's one of the reasons why our brain is wired to particularly focus on the things that we shouldn't do again. Positive experiences are less important for our survival. So they take longer to actually embed into our memory. So as we just talked about the out breath, when you notice that things are going well, to reassure your mind and reset your nervous system, just take 3 breaths to actually say, this is fine, I'm safe, this is going well. And it could be something as simple as when you're out on a walk, just taking a moment to notice nature, just 3 out breaths and just notice how that settles you, so that then you're in a stronger position to move back and re-engage with life. So if we use that as an example now of finding an anchor in the present moment, just wherever you are watching this webinar, is there something that you can see or something you can hear? Maybe there's an echo of something that you've eaten or drunk. Maybe there's something you can touch. or maybe just coming back to your breathing, that makes you feel safer and secure. If you just take those 3 breaths, so just breathe in and out, in and out, and really settle down on that final out breath. So it can be as quick as just 3 breaths, but make sure that you're focusing at that point on something that makes you feel more settled. So it's very important that we observe things like our breathing with a compassionate curiosity rather than trying to change what we find. So the more that you work with mindfulness, the more that we would look at things like, for example, when you come back to your breathing, you find it's light. It's just like, oh, I'm anxious. So instead of denying that and thinking, no, I shouldn't be anxious, and all the inner voice, this inner critic starts to kick in, with mindfulness, we'd learn to say, wow, okay, so I'm anxious. So I'm going to greet that with calmness and work out how I can make myself feel more calm and more stable. So we would practice that with the anchors about just noticing when we're judging, if there's a sound that we don't like, can we stay with that sound and just breathe through it and let our responses settle? So this is an important foundational practice that we use within mindfulness. And how you can create mindful self-care pauses in your day is to keep bringing your mind back to the present, as we've just done, with this compassionate curiosity. So whenever you notice that you're caught up in anxious thinking, think, okay, just need to settle myself. What can I tune into? What anchor can I find in the present moment? Just to take my 3 breaths and just settle myself. Notice the pleasant moments in each day. This builds our resilience and avoids us feeling overwhelmed, because when our stress response is high, it's focusing on the things that are negative so that it can keep us safe. So we want to find a balance with that, to coming back to the positive things that maybe our brain is just skimming over. So you could, for example, watch the clouds pass by and notice how the light changes. We also work a lot with noticing the fluidity. Everything is flowing and impermanent, and everything changes. We know that, don't we, at the moment, is everything is changing day to day. And there are lots of practices within mindfulness that helps us to become more confident about moving with the flow, about thinking, okay, so the past has gone now, and instead of thinking, oh my goodness, what have we lost? It's like, okay, what do we have in the present moment, and how do I work with this? And there's a lot of practices around letting go and going with the flow, being in the present moment, very empowering. So remembering to tune into your breathing whenever you remember. So I would begin even as I wake up. You wake up in the morning, and quite often, unfortunately, at the moment, you might get a surge of adrenaline, of worry, of like, oh my goodness, what is today going to bring? So before you even get out of breath, just think, okay, I'm just going to settle this anxiety, set the day off on the right foot. So I'm just going to take 3 breaths. I'm going to focus on the fact I'm safe, I'm warm in bed, it's going to be okay, and then you start the day. So coming back to 3 breaths throughout the day would be one of the things that I really hope that you take away from the webinar today as one of the basic techniques for self-care. We can also explore mindful movements, do this a lot with people, about noticing where you hold the tension and just a few moments just to release where that is. And for some people that's held in the jaw, for some in the hands actually. So we practice just opening and closing the hands with the rhythm of the breath. It's just a calming thing that you can do. There's all sorts of options that we can work on with mindful movements. Now, in terms of one particular meditation, I'm often asked this, of all the meditations in mindfulness, which one would I recommend? Now, for self-care, I've gone to the evidence base, and the one that comes up with the most evidence is one called Metta, or loving kindness. Now, they've even, used EEG machines to track brainwaves of people doing this. And it's been shown to quieten down the part of the brain that really kicks in when we're being hard on ourselves, when we're judging ourselves, when we're dwelling on the past, wishing things were as they were, and also telling ourselves stories where we don't notice what's going on around us. So this is particularly if we're caught in stories about the future, running away with ourselves. So Metta has been shown to help us move away from that. That's another interesting book there if you want an easy read. Mindful Work, How Meditation is Changing Business from the Inside Out. You'll find this experiment in there. It's a good summary, that book. So the experiment used a simplified version of the traditional form, which is that you start by wishing yourself happy, May I be happy? May I be healthy? May I be safe? May I be free from suffering? And traditionally, you would work with that with yourself, and then you would think of somebody that you feel affection towards, kindness towards. Then you would choose somebody about whom you feel fairly neutral, and then you would choose somebody whom you feel quite negative about. But don't jump into that one straight away. We always work on ourselves first to build ourselves up. Then you would send it out further. So in this case, he skipped those 3 steps, just went from himself to the scientists in the room, wishing them the same, and then out to the whole world. So as I briefly referred to before, something very interesting happens when we're stressed is that we become very inward looking. And using this kind of meditation where it helps us to start with ourselves to build our own resilience, but then lift ourselves up and wish others well, it settles our stress response in a way that we can't do just by staying inward looking, which is really interesting about how we start with compassion for ourselves and take that out. And not only do other people benefit, but we benefit from that as well. So that's going back to that idea where I talked about earlier about team mindfulness, about this sense of being part of something much bigger is beneficial for everybody who's involved. So there's lots of other studies, but I thought that this one was interesting. This was done with nurses, palliative care teams. They used Metta over a 10-week program. So they practiced the meditation each day, but they also wrote up some of the phrases from the meditation that I've just shared with you and placed them around so that they would see them. They were on the staff notice boards, for example. And it was around self-care. 85% of the individual goals, but self-care goals were particularly high, which is why I've included it in the self-care webinar today. But the important thing, they obviously had a great teacher on this course, is that you don't just recite the phrases like some kind of mantra. They shouldn't feel outside of you. You take that phrase, may I be safe, and on the out breath, the best way to describe it is that you kind of drop it down inside your body, really low down in your abdomen to the center, kind of like, we talk about a gut feeling. It's having that gut feeling of safety. So you breathe in and out, may I be safe. And you would repeat, may I be safe, safe, until you actually really start to feel that. It's as though you have a spark of safety deep inside you. And with each breath, you just make that grow into a flame and then out into this warmth that spreads throughout you so that you feel safe. So we're not just repeating the words, we're actually inspiring these feelings. And it's very empowering when you start to feel that happen, because then you realize you do have more control over how you feel and you can change how you feel, far more so than just being pushed around by life and depending on things to happen to you so that you feel more safe. You can actually inspire that from within and then help the people around you to feel safer as well. So when we talk about, this is just another way of explaining this, is where is your awareness? So attention comes from the Latin is to stretch towards. So say I'm feeling very anxious about the whole thing and I see somebody else who's more confident. I think, oh, I wish I was like them. Now, even if I say that, I don't know whether you get a sense within your body that my energy is going out towards them and I'm feeling negative towards myself. I'm not good enough. I want to be like that. So I'm drawn out from myself, which means that I feel less stable, less strong. A more mindful approach is to say, okay, so they're really confident. I want to be like that. Where inside me is that spark of confidence that might be really small at the moment? So in other words, instead now of me wanting to move from A to B, I stay at A and I convert A into B. So with each breath, it'd be, okay, so here is this little seed of confidence inside me, or safety. You can use whichever word you want. So you can use confidence, safe, calm, whichever word is how you want to feel. Breathe in, you're aware of the seed, and as you breathe out, you just help that seed to grow and grow and grow. With each breath, just growing it. So you can use either of those analogies. More traditionally, it's the watering the seeds of whatever it is that you want to feel. For me, I often find it easier to imagine the spark and the flame and then the warmth. There's no right or wrong. There never is in mindfulness, which is one of the reasons that I love teaching it, is that I can just give you ideas, you explore them, and whatever works for you is the way to progress your practice. So just remembering of this idea that if you want to be something other than what you are, rather than trying to move towards that, let's find the spark within you of what it is that you want and grow that where you are. It's a much more solid way of progressing and transforming ourselves. So what if your self-care is undermined by repetitive negative thoughts? A very important concept about the difference between primary and secondary suffering is that something unpleasant happens to us. Let's take the idea of a new coronavirus restriction, for example. Our secondary suffering is that we then start to really dwell on that and spin all sorts of stories around that about what's going to happen to it. So we can get so caught up in our thinking about, or our worrying, that we can't respond to that by saying, okay, so this is how something is, what am I going to do about it? And really being able to see clearly the best action to take, because the stress response just sends us into this fight or flight instead of this calm responding. So when we can see the difference between what our mind is creating as our secondary suffering and what the primary suffering is, mindfulness helps us to mind the gap. And you may have seen the blog on the Master Inholder's website that was kindly put up a week or so ago that I wrote for you. If you're interested in more, it's explained in more detail there. But mindfulness enables us to mind the gap. So when I'm aware, oh, this is just my thinking, my thoughts are not necessarily true. And this is a great thing to write on a little card. This is the one that's stuck on my fridge. Is it true? Are you sure? Because the number of times where I'm aware that I'm worrying about things that may not be true. And mindfulness is this awareness. Oh, hang on a minute. I'm starting to believe what my mind is saying. It might not be true. I use an anchor, come back to the present moment, feel more solid where I am, let the emotion drop, see things more clearly and respond from that place of inner strength. So to change this critical inner self-talk, is about awareness is key. This is really what mindfulness is about this awareness. So what exactly does your inner talk say? Really listen to when your mind is undermining you with the thoughts that it's feeding you, because sometimes this is so much part of our soundtrack to life that it's just so often there that we don't notice it. And one of the first things with mindfulness is just becoming aware of what it is. And looking at these things that we can see here is working out why we feel like that, where it's coming from, so that we can see it more clearly and decide whether or not to believe it, basically. You respond to that self-critical voice with kindness, because all of this is trying to help you, it's trying to make you a better person, but making an active decision to soften the tone. Quite often we speak to ourselves in a way that we would never speak to anybody else in. We need to reframe the observation. So imagine how a compassionate friend would respond to you, and change the way that you speak to yourself into something kinder, but also set this firm intention. I was really quite surprised how I felt quite powerless, that my anxiety would run away with me, until I actually would be strong enough to say, no, stop. I am absolutely not going to let you take me down that path. So it's still with kindness, but there's a firm kindness. I'm going to pick up my attention. I'm going to put it somewhere else. I'm going to build up my confidence, my safety and security, and move forward from here. And so it doesn't have to be done with harshness, but there does need to be an element of self-confidence in there, which is what mindfulness is so brilliant at building for us. So how do we build this sense of kindness? Wake up by taking the 3 breaths that I mentioned before and smiling to yourself. And this, what I'm describing here, is a version of a meditation called a body scan that you may have heard of. So when you're waking up, you start from your toes, and you can, and it is designed to make you smile. So it does seem a bit silly when I say this out loud, but just be aware of your toes on the in-breath, so aware of toes, and on the out-breath, smile to your toes. And that can literally be a real smile, or it can just be a smile within your head, or just a sense of kindness, a sense of making friends with your physical body. And in the morning, if you work from your toes to your head, it raises your energy. And at the end of the day, if you work from your head down to your toes, it settles your energy. So this is a really important meditation that sounds bizarre and sounds too simple to work, but this is one that I used particularly after my cancer treatment, when I was still in an awful lot of pain, both emotional and physical. And this, I would say, would be, along with the metta that I've described to you before, this is so powerful, because we often carry around quite negative feelings towards our own body. For me, I had a dodgy knee for years, and it was just like, oh, my knee. So the first time I did this meditation and said, smile to your knee, I was amazed, because the first thing I thought is, well, I'm not smiling to my knee. So first of all, that made me laugh. And it also showed me, it raised my awareness of what was actually going on for me inside and how I could change that. So with self-care, this is another very powerful practice of making friends with yourself on a physical and then on this emotional level. Very powerful, even though it sounds a bit odd. You have to go with me on that one. So the last thing that I want to leave you with is that people often think that you need to find extra time in the day to meditate in order to practice mindfulness. Now, that will definitely progress your practice more quickly. But particularly when you're in a heightened state of anxiety, it's easier to bring mindfulness into the life that you already have, rather than find an extra 10 minutes a day. So just try to bring a sense of self-care and kindness to your everyday activities. So when you're showering, do that with kindness towards yourself. Dress yourself with a sense of protectiveness, as you would a child on a cold day. You might help them get their hat on and their wellies on, and put a scarf around them. So do that for yourself with that same sense of a bit of a sense of humour. If it makes you smile, that's great. But this sense of kindness is ever so important. But to feed yourself, can you imagine if you were caring for somebody and you fed them, but with no kindness? Or you bathe them or you dress them with no kindness? It wouldn't be caring for somebody, would it? And I'm sure you couldn't do that. And so it's bringing a sense of that and awareness of that into your own life. So develop a sense of compassion as well about this work, rest, play balance, and notice what's going on in your life, and maybe where you can make a few simple adjustments with this sense of self-compassion, self-care. So what mindfulness can bring to you is this ability just to stop, to calm yourself, and to pause long enough to see clearly how best to care for yourself. And then remembering that the better that you care for yourself, the easier it is to take that out, is then you can start to care for others. But it begins with yourself. So the summary of mindfulness is that it's very personal. So I'm not sure what I've shared today that might have felt relevant for you, but feel free to type into the Q&A box any key take-home ideas that you're going to take away with you, and any questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now to come back to the lovely David and see what the questions are that I can help you with. So thank you very much for your time. And there we are, back in the room.
Katie, thank you very much for that. My goodness, how topical it is when you mentioned about the fact that we might actually be quite worried and stressed by things such as more restrictions going on to us. Well, as we know, yesterday it was announced that many more restrictions are going to happen in Scotland and are likely to happen in the north of England next week. So I do feel that many of us at the moment probably feel that hospitality is very much in the firing line. I mean, we're almost being singled out and shot at.
Yeah.
I mean, is there anything we can do about that?
Well, the thing is to be aware. Where I would use mindfulness for that is for being aware of when you are in that fight or flight stress response, which is when you may not be thinking clearly because you're just feeling under threat. And with that is to then come back to yourself so that you're feeling more secure, so that, because that helps to think creatively. And it might very definitely be about taking action. But rather than responding from a place of fear and anger, it's much easier to get people to listen to you if you are expressing yourself calmly, clearly, so that you have all of the evidence that you need. you've got you've got the scientific evidence, you've got a calm, and you approach them with calmness, very determined, and a very clear plan. So the first thing is to get the clear plan, and that's where thinking calmly and working together, which I know the hospitality industry is just fabulous at doing, is also being open enough to really listen to each other, to feel as though you're all in this together, so that you get the best of everybody with all the amazing people that you have here, and then respond calmly. Because of course, as you know, is that if you go to somebody like a minister full of anger, they're going to feel defensive and possibly start fighting back. Whereas coming to people with calmly, and this is what we want, is much more effective. This comes from Thich Nhat Hanh, who was put forward for the Nobel Peace Prize by Martin Luther King. So that would be his advice, I'm sure.
Well, thank you for that. And I've got a question that has just come in. When you don't have the vision, personally, to see the light at the end of the tunnel, what would you advise in how to create and see that light at the end of the tunnel, especially with the challenges we face at the moment? So for people who maybe don't have the vision to do some of what you've suggested.
Mm-hmm. So there'd be two things that I would say to that is, first of all, building a sense of safety and positivity, even within the restrictions that we have now. So to see the small glimmers that are there all around us at the moment of things continuing. So that's where the focusing on the positive becomes really important, so that you can see the glimmers when it all feels dark. But also, and this is a challenging part of mindfulness, there's a big part of it which is about letting go of the old reality, properly putting it down and saying, okay, so if we can never go back to that, what does the future look like? How can we reshape things properly? So it's very interesting is that if any of you have experienced, for example, a life-threatening illness, your whole world just falls apart. And you kind of need to let it fall apart in order to see how to build something new. Whereas if we're always grasping for the past, maybe we're missing something new. And maybe in the future we'll look back and see that this hospitality industry goes through a complete shift in what it's offering. But the new reality might be even more exciting than the one that we had before. So in terms of finding the vision, I think on an individual level, my suggestion would be to find the glimmers so that you feel more secure in the present moment. And that will open you up to more to this idea of flow, of being more comfortable about not knowing. So if we can live with insecurity, not just in these times, but even when things settle down again, that's where the real liberation lies, of this ability to flow.
And another question we've got is, how easy is it to share this sort of idea with our senior staff? I mean, they're a hardworking bunch. Many of them are very innovative. They're passionate. But is this an easy thing for us to share with those members of staff and to get them to buy into? Or are they going to think we're slightly odd?
Well, I love working with people like that. I think some of the most brilliant converts to mindfulness are the people who are originally cynical, because they ask the best questions. And when people are honest about, well, surely this doesn't work, and how does this apply to me? And you can come up with the answers for them, then they're often the best people. And also, it's quite common that I work with people and can help them to identify where they are already being mindful. And those tend to be the parts of life that are working best for them. So if I say, well, that's actually already mindfulness, what you're doing. So let's take what you're doing and build your strength around that and make it more mindful. And what you're doing here, let's put it into this framework and see how we can move it into other aspects of what you do. Then you can start to take them with you. I worked with the staff at Georgian House for over a year, and it was fantastic. We had people from across the teams, and what team mindfulness shows is that you don't need everybody to be on board. So within a team, even if you've got 2 or 3 people who are working mindfully, they are enough to affect the dynamics of the team positively. So actually it shows it's particularly effective if it's the person leading the team who's on board with it, but it doesn't have to be everybody, because mindfulness isn't going to be for everybody.
Okay, well, Katie, we're sort of heading towards our time limit here. You kept very much within your sort of 25 minutes, for which I thank you, because one of the great things about these webinars is that they are fairly short and sweet, and they can take people out, people can take that time out of work. So I want to, on behalf of all of us, to thank you for doing this for us and for coming here. I have to say, it's interesting stuff. And I think at the moment, we need all the help we can get, both, of course, as our businesses, but also individually as well. So for everybody on this call, if you wanted more help, Katie, of course, can offer you more help, both individually, or if you wanted to go and get a group together within your company. So, you can get in touch with us and we can sort all that out. But I wanted to thank you very much for coming on. It's something that's just flashed up on my screen here. Oh, there is another one here. What is the best way to switch off from all things that we are juggling 24/7 at the moment? Having a me time seems completely unrealistic, but how do I come out of this? So there I am saying, thank you very much to you. We've run out of time, but could you say, how do we do that?
Absolutely. So the first thing is to not think of a difference between work time and me time. Because if you think about it logically, that's a slightly strange concept. All time is yours. So within your working day, it's literally finding those few moments to calm your nervous system. So as I was saying about focusing on the positive, coming back to the anchors, I've got a document actually that I can share with Georgia, that she can share with you all, that explains that in a little bit more detail. So at any point when you start to feel overwhelmed, look around you. What is in the present moment that makes you feel settled? So that might be a beautiful thing that's in the hotel where you are at the moment. It might be that you've stepped outside and you can just see a glimpse of the sky. And in that moment, just take those 3 breaths, focus on the out breath, and that is your time. All of this is your time. So it's being aware, this is my moment, every moment, and where am I going to place my attention and how am I going to feel within that moment? And the more that it becomes a habit, it's quite amazing that your subconscious then starts to seek out those positive things, which can switch your whole perception of life from your mind focusing on the negative things to keep you safe, which can make you feel very overwhelmed, to your mind starts to, every time you start to worry, it goes, oh yes, but there's this nice thing, there's this good thing. And when you really start to feel that even on the darkest of days, there are things that can just make you feel a spark of happiness or kindness, then that transforms your whole experience of life.
Okay, so it is possible to do this by remembering that all our time is me time.
Yes.
We've just got to bear that in mind. Well, once again, thank you very much. Thank you to the team who are working behind the scenes to make this go relatively smoothly. It's my first one, so I probably sort of sat here looking like an idiot at the beginning, and that's no surprise to all those who know me. But don't forget, you can get more help from Katie if you want to, and also you can get to see this, the recording of this, which will be sent to you, and please share that. So all that remains is for me to say thank you, all of you who've joined us today. We find these webinars are working very well, and what's really interesting is the reach that they get when they're reshared through the video. So thank you again, Katie. Thank you everybody for being here, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.